So hi everyone, my name is Christian. I use they them pronouns and I am a student living and working on the unceded ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And that land is colonially known as Vancouver. I'm a student at UBC and I conduct my research out of the BC Center on Substance Use, where I'm supervised by Dr. Burnaby. And as AJ mentioned, I'll be talking about my research for my master's today, which has been focused on the experiences of trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming youth who use cannabis. My work is qualitative based. I think this is the first qualitative presentation of this session. So it's photo voice based and features the experiences of 27 trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming youth. Youth were recruited from a wide variety of geographies throughout BC, including more rural communities such as Prince George. Now, I just want to mention, although I'm super happy to talk about photo voice and methodology afterwards, methodology is not the topic of this presentation. I'm going to focus on results and thematics and try to keep it to 10 minutes. But before I do that, I just wanted to highlight the vibrant community of trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming youth who are behind this study, both who are participants as well as those who are youth advisory committee members. Our YAC is something that I started up in September of 2022. It is closed to trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming youth who use substances, and that includes substances other than cannabis. And this has been a really critical part in informing the direction of the study, especially the data analytical aspects of the study, such as thematic analysis and development of those thematics. So big shout out to the YAC and the community that's behind all of these quotes and pictures that I'm going to share with you today. So just to recap, the objective of this work is to understand how cannabis use features in the gender experiences of trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming youth. I'm going to start reading that as TGNC, as you'll see on the slides. The first major thematic that I want to introduce today is what I conceptualize as cannabis as a technology of the self. And this is, of course, referring to some of Foucault's work in the 80s around technology itself, and speaks to a lot of the experiences we're seeing surrounding cannabis use purposefully and strategically to overcome certain barriers to authentic self-expression and embodiment. And in our current socio-political climate, where there are these continuous attacks on transness and trans identity, especially amongst trans youth, this creates very little space for trans youth to explore and understand their gender in a way that is safe and affirming for them. So in this respect, across our conversations with TGNC youth, they shared that cannabis plays a huge role in relieving some of that anxiety they feel when going out in public expressing their gender authentically. And Focus is a really great example of that. They're a 24-year-old non-binary youth who I had the pleasure of speaking with in 2 separate interviews. And they submitted this photo, which you see on the far left of the screen, which is of a skirt as well as a collar, which they described as an outfit that's super gender affirming for them, especially on days they're feeling more femme. And the collar they described as being both an important fashion statement as well as symbolic to potential sexual partners. And when discussing this photo, Focus shared with me how when they smoke cannabis, they feel so much more comfortable wearing gender affirming articles of clothing or just expressing their gender in their most authentic way possible compared to when they're not high. And they went as far as to say that had they not been smoking, they probably wouldn't feel as comfortable actually going out wearing this outfit that you see here on the screen. And multiple participants throughout our discussions talked about cannabis as a way to overcome certain barriers they're facing in their lives with regards to self-expression. And one of those really large things that we learned was that cannabis allowed a lot of the youth we spoke with the ability to overcome their internalized homophobia and transphobia, such that they could express themselves in a more authentic way and better understand their sexuality and gender. And to sort of exemplify this, I want to introduce another youth, Lauren, who's a 24-year-old non-binary youth participant. And usually I just show the photo first, but I think it's PDF, so there's the code as well. But the photo on the left here, they had submitted, and it is just at face value. It's an asphalt road with cracks in there, and then you have water filling in the gaps in the road to form puddles. But Lauren had a really powerful analogy here that really stuck with me throughout this work. And they explained how they view their body as a whole mound, with these cracks in the asphalt being receptors, new receptors that they have for their body. And they explained that when they use cannabis, those receptors become filled in or filled up to make them feel whole. So really alluding to ideas of wholeness and embodiedness that cannabis brings Lauren and so many other youth that I spoke with. And it is at this diminished state of anxiety where they're feeling whole, they're feeling embodied, that Lauren explains being able to explore their gender more, whether that be making appointments with the trans specialty team, getting a short haircut, purchasing a binder, things like this. And then I also just want to introduce a sub-theme here. Cannabis as a social disruptor, which is within this larger thematic of cannabis as a technology itself. And this really speaks to a lot of what participants shared about using cannabis as a tool to break through barriers of shame, stigma, gender norms, which were previously preventing them from learning about themselves, understanding themselves, and being themselves. And with that, using cannabis as a tool, youth describe being able to challenge and disrupt certain gender norms and standards in their lives. And ACE is a really good example of this. They talk a lot about the shame which they experience as a gender fluid, gender non-conforming person, and explain that when they use cannabis, they feel more empowered to dress as they want, wear makeup, try a new hairdo, things like this. The next major thematic that I'm going to introduce is cannabis as a catalyst. And this refers to specific experiences where youth communicated using cannabis to engage in introspection or reflection, and how that subsequently facilitated identity discovery and development of TGNC youth. For example, I'll introduce another youth participant, Carrot, who's 23 years old. They are non-binary fluid youth, and they introduced this idea of cannabis as a catalyst, sharing that cannabis is a catalyst in questioning their gender and sexuality by allowing them to heal and awaken spiritually. And once they were able to do so, it became so much easier to pinpoint their gender expression and sexuality. Similarly, Toby, who is a 21-year-old bigender youth, shared that cannabis helps to silence the noise of racing thoughts in their head. And that's something that we heard from a lot of participants, that common line, silencing the noise of racing thoughts. And by silencing that mush of thoughts in the head and focusing on and being able to focus on certain thoughts, that allowed them to question and explore and understand aspects of their gender and sexuality, which they previously weren't able to do while not high. And to the right, your right, Toby, this is a picture which they submitted for the study of them using cannabis, which was very tied to being in nature. And nature featured as a key transformative space throughout participants. I would say more than half of the photos that we received were nature-based, and here's just a couple of those. And Panda really explains it really beautifully. When they are using cannabis out in nature, when they're smoking in nature, they can be themselves. They're alone, not worried about the public eye or how they're presenting. or how they're being perceived. It's just constant. It's the same feeling. And this really spoke true for a lot of participants we chatted with throughout our interviews. And I'll just conclude by dropping a third theme that really excites me, but I'm not going to be able to get into it because I think I'm close to time, which is what I'm calling to smoke feels gender. And this refers to experiences where youth share that they use cannabis in purposeful ways to access moments of gender euphoria and affirmation. And this is really wonderful in a time where euphoria and affirmation aren't often something that we focus on. We tend to focus on gender dysphoria and mental health challenges. So this is something that I'm happy to chat more about afterwards. But for today, I'll end there. Just want to acknowledge my committee members, my supervisor, Dr. Rod Knight, the study participants, and our youth advisory committee. Thank you so much for your time. And it's been so wonderful sharing space with you. And CAHR, thank you for funding the project, and members of the Knight research team, especially Trevor Goodyear, who's co-facilitating it. And yeah, you can reach out if you have questions as well by email.